extended it out to everything. It was a complete ban on the city. So anyone who chose to stay and fight, they were not allowed to live. Or given to the Lord's treasury, especially the gold and the silver, because a lot of that would be used later on in the construction of a place for the people to gather to worship. But that was the command. And so we see in Joshua 7:1 that they didn't listen. It says, "But the sons of Israel acted unfaithfully in regard to the things under the ban. For Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, from the tribe of Judah, took some of the things under the ban. Therefore the anger of the Lord burned against the sons of Israel." So Israel had acted unfaithfully. The term mahal means treacherously. It means they had acted treacherously towards God. Some of the people had taken things that were not theirs to take, because especially if they took the gold and the silver, they were in essence stealing from God, because all the gold and silver had been earmarked for God's treasury. And so God is angry with his people for disobeying him and basically stealing from him. And that really is what had happened. In particular, we see in verse 1 that the guilty culprit is a man named Achan, and he is a member of the tribe of Judah. Verse 2, "Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, east of Bethel, and said to them, 'Go up and spy out the land.' So the men went up and spied out Ai. They returned to Joshua and said to him, 'Do not let all the people go up.' So they went up, they checked out this land called Ai, and they decided that it wasn't very well fortified, there weren't a lot of fighting men there, and they didn't see any reason for all the people to have to travel and all the fighting men to array themselves into battle. So basically their summary was, we only need about 2,000 or 3,000 men. That's all that needs to go up to Ai. Do not make all the people toil up there, for they are few." So they basically looked at Ai and they thought, oh, this is no problem. We can do this, and we don't even need a large number of men to do it. So we're just going to take 2,000 or 3,000 men. We'll leave everybody else to rest here in the encampment, and we will go take Ai, and then we can proceed from there. Oh, wow. Everything's falling apart tonight. So about 3,000 men from the people went up there, but they fled from the men of Ai. So they went up, about 2,000 or 3,000, and about 3,000 actually it says, and they went up and they got beat, and they got beat badly. The men of Ai struck down about 36 of their men and pursued them from the gate as far as Shebarim and struck them down on the descent, so the hearts of the people melted and became as water. So in this passage, what we are allowed to see is the actual cost and consequence of sin. What should have been easy for the people of God, especially with God's power, they should have easily overcome the people of Ai. This is not a major foe. They were correct in that assumption. From what little we know of Ai, it was a very small city. The tribe of Ai was a very small tribe. They were not known for being mighty warriors. And so they were right in their assessment, and they should have been able with 3,000 men to easily overwhelm Ai. But this is a punishment from God. The reason they were not able to be victorious is because God was punishing them for the sin of Achan. He was punishing them for stealing from him. So what should have been an easy victory for the people of God had become an utter and humiliating defeat. It became absolutely impossible for them to overcome this small group of people, because rather than God fighting for them, now God was fighting against them. And so there was no way they were going to take this city on their own. And because of that, 36 men died, which means 36 families mourned the loss of husbands, fathers, sons. The people were then struck with fear. This is the first major defeat they suffered after they entered into the promised land. And it wasn't even against a powerful foe. It was against a very weak foe. And Israel's leaders, beginning from Joshua on down, were perplexed and distressed at what happened. They couldn't believe that this small force was able to defeat this group of 3,000 men. But Joshua is pretty smart. He's pretty wise. He knows that something more is going on here than what you can see with your physical eyes. So in verse 6, Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of the Lord until the evening, both he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. Now, a reminder, dust on the heads is a sign of remorse, repentance, sorrow. It's a sign of grief. And so he's actually grieving over the loss of these 36 men, but more importantly, he's grieving over the defeat of God's people. And he knows that there's something seriously wrong here. There's no way that this happens unless something has been done by Israel that has angered God. So he's pretty aware that God is angry with Israel at this moment. He's just not sure exactly what has happened. And so he's going to go ahead and mourn the loss, grieve over the loss, and at the same time then begin to beseech the Lord for an answer. So we see in verse 7 where he begins to cry out, "Alas, O Lord God, why did you ever bring this people over the Jordan, only to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been willing to dwell beyond the Jordan." And that's a strange prayer, isn't it? "O Lord, what can I say, since Israel has turned their back before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear of it, and they will surround us and cut off our name from the earth. And what will you do for your great name?" Now you think he's being a little over the top in this prayer, but you have to understand the reality of where they're at. So I did a little research on this years ago and found out why he's so distraught. He is grieving over the loss of 36 fighting men that he probably knew, since they were in a select group, and most of that select group had been around Joshua for a long time. That's why he's so shocked that this handpicked group of 3,000 men were not able to overcome a small city. But on top of that, you also have to understand their position. So Jericho is not in a strategic location for them. Jericho is in a plain area in the lowlands of southern Israel. And he's there now with his back to the river Jordan, which he can't cross any longer because it's flooded by this time of the year. So he can't cross the Jordan and go back, and that's what he's lamenting. He probably should have stayed on the other side a little longer if God's not going to be with him, is what he's saying, because now he's in flood season and he can't go back. They can only go forward, and the problem with going forward for them now is they're not in a very defensible position, especially since the walls of Jericho have been laid flat. So they don't have any defensive positions. They're camping in tents and living in the remains of Jericho, and they need to take Ai because Ai is in the foothills. It's sort of a gateway into the mountains. And if they take Ai, that region will afford them a better place to camp and set up defenses. And so what he's terrified of is if the Amorites hear about this, it will embolden them to come down in force against the Israelites. And Joshua knows that if the Amorites come against Israel without God's help, Israel's toast. They're cooked. They don't have a chance against the Amorites. The Amorites are professional warriors, and they know what they're doing, and he's terrified that they're going to begin to think that God has abandoned his people, and then when they come down, Israel will not have a chance. So he's crying out to God. He knows they need to take Ai. They need to move into the foothills. They need to get off of the plain, and they need to get themselves into a more defensible position. And so he's crying out to God. And he realized what's at stake. If God doesn't help them, if they're not able to move out of this plain and into the foothills, if God does not begin to fight for them again, they don't have a chance. So that's why you get this over-the-top, distraught prayer. He realizes this is more than just a minor defeat. This is a serious issue. And the biggest part of this is that God is not fighting for them any longer, and he is fully aware of that. So verse 10 then, this is where God begins to answer. So the Lord said to Joshua, "Rise up. Why is it that you have fallen on your face? Israel has sinned." Now, he's not blaming Joshua for this. And again, we have to understand a couple lessons being taught to us about sin here. First thing you have to learn about sin is that sin has consequences. Even for God's people, sin carries consequences. There is a cost to sin. People are hurt by it. People damage themselves. They hurt others. We have to pay a price to God. Sometimes, depending on the sin, we pay a price to society. Sin always comes with a cost. Sometimes that cost is higher than others. In this particular case, The cost of Achan's sin to Israel as a whole has been exceptionally high. Many people have suffered because of the sin of someone else. But that's the very nature of sin. It's not just the cost and suffering that sin causes the sinner, it's also the cost and suffering that sin causes those who get caught up in it at the same time. You don't even have to participate in sin to get caught up in it. It's everywhere you look. And the consequences of that sin spill over from the sinner to those around them. So in this case, Achan's sin has certainly spilled over into all of Israel, and all the Israelites are suffering because of the sin of one man. So he goes on, and God is explaining this to Joshua. Israel has sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant, which I commanded them. And they have even taken some of the things under the ban, and have both stolen and deceived. So God views this as theft, as you can tell. The stolen part is clearly, he is explaining to Joshua that someone has taken something that belonged to me, and then they have lied about it. They have been deceptive. Moreover, they have also put them among their own things. So these things they had stolen, they had taken and put it amongst their items. And again, that's part of the deception, to hide the fact that they had taken something that belonged to God, something they were commanded not to take. Therefore, the sons of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. So God makes it clear, you can't fight without me. If you fight without me, you're going to lose, because you cannot stand before your enemies on your own. And that's something that we learned very early on in the story of Israel. They were always a tiny group of people compared to the nations they had to face. So when it comes to the Amorites, not only are the Amorites better warriors, there are actually more of them, especially if they can motivate all the tribes to come together at once. And so God makes it clear to Joshua, you can't win any battle if I'm not fighting for you. You can't win any battle on your own. In fact, what's going to happen is you're going to turn your backs before their enemies. Exactly what happened when they went up to Ai on their own. They wound up retreating in disarray, and many of them were killed in their retreat. And he says, this is the reason why I'm not fighting for Israel. They have become accursed because they stole from God. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy the things under the ban from your midst. So God says, I'm not going to fight for you anymore until you figure out who stole from me, and you basically take care of that situation. You need to rectify what has been done. So he says to Joshua, rise up, consecrate the people, and say, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow. For thus the Lord, the God of Israel, has said, there are things under the ban in your midst, O Israel. You cannot stand before your enemies until you have removed the things under the ban from your midst. So God's not fooling around. He's very serious about this because they have stolen basically from him. And he is demanding that Joshua go through the camp and root out this evil. This evil has to be dealt with, and until it's dealt with, God will no longer fight for Israel. In fact, he will be their adversary rather than their champion. And so they realize what's at stake. Joshua certainly realizes what's at stake, and so he begins to seek to rectify the situation. So in the morning, God gives him instructions. Again, God's instructing Joshua on how to deal with this. So in the morning, then you shall come near by your tribes. So the first step in verse 13, don't miss this, it's important. He told Joshua to go out after he's finished giving him instructions, and that night he's to command all the people to consecrate themselves to the Lord. And the term consecrate means, basically in essence, it means to sanctify yourself, to set yourself aside for God and God alone. So if you had sinned, my understanding of the term consecrate and the fact that he gives them an overnight to process through what's going on, is that if someone had come forward during the night and been honest about what they had done and brought the spoils that they had stolen from the Lord, there would have been forgiveness. If they don't come forward during the night after the evening warning, then in the morning, this is what's supposed to happen next. And of course, we know from the story that Achan does not come forward during the night. He does not consecrate himself and his family for the Lord. He does not clean the sin out of his own life and out of his household. Instead, he just continues to deceive and try to hide it even more. So the next step then, as God instructs Joshua, is in the morning, then you shall come near by your tribes. So if no one comes forward during the night, then that means someone has refused to consecrate themselves. And then in the morning, you're going to bring the tribes before. They're going to come nearby. So basically, it appears that Joshua was going to set up some centralized location, and he would be the figurehead of that location as the leader of Israel on earth, the man that God is using. And then the tribe leaders will come before him. And then he's going to do a process of elimination is what he's going to do. And think about how long this would take otherwise. At this point, Israel numbers somewhere between 1 and 2 million people. That's a lot of people. A lot of places to hide a little bit of gold and silver, right? A lot of tents, a lot of families. So the quickest way to do this, and God's very clear about how it's going to work, God's going to reveal it, and the way in which he's going to do it is Joshua's going to set up in this central location, and all the tribes, probably the tribal leaders, are going to parade before him. And then this is how it will work. The rest of verse 14 says, "And it shall be that the tribe which the Lord takes by lot shall come near by families, and the family which the Lord takes shall come near by households, and the household which the Lord takes shall come near man by man." So here's how Joshua's going to know. God's going to orchestrate that, and they're going to do the lot thing. We don't know exactly how they drew lots. We just know that they did, because you find it in multiple passages. God will control that drawing until it's narrowed down to one family, or however many families are guilty, and then Joshua will know for certain that those individual people that are identified through this process are those who are guilty. So verse 15, "It shall be that the one who is taken with the things under the ban shall be burned with fire." So God says once you identify those who have taken these things, they'll be killed. He and all that belongs to him. You begin to see how high the price of sin is? Now this is a great story for teaching about hell, by the way. Because one of people's main objections to the gospel nowadays is that there is a hell. They hate that, and they are offended by it, and they will even say, "I don't want any part of a God who sends people to hell." But this is common throughout the Old Testament. God is not to be trifled with, and sin is not a minor issue. Being partly good is not good enough. And Achan has done something offensive to God, and if he doesn't come forward during the night when he has the opportunity to consecrate himself willingly, he will be dealt with the next day. And this is the way in which God is going to deal with him. And again, it's a very similar parallel to God's eternal plan of eternal fire and separation from him, which, as harsh as that sounds, it is fair and it is just, since people are, by nature even, sinners. So it shall be the one who is taken with the things under the ban shall be burned with fire, he and all that belongs to him. So this is not just going to affect him, it's going to affect his whole family, because he has transgressed the covenant of the Lord, because he has committed a disgraceful thing in Israel. Do the sins of people affect other people? And the answer is yes. This story teaches that basic principle over and over and over again. First, we learn just how far the effect of Achan's sin extended. It extended all the way out to every single person in the nation of Israel. And then the greatest punishment, or the harshest punishment, is going to fall on him and his immediate family. So all the nation suffered at one level, and his family will suffer at an even higher level, because his sin doesn't just affect himself, it also affects those around him. And that's the way sin is, and it's an important lesson to learn. When we sin, it not only affects us, it also affects those around us. So verse 7, again, or verse 15, God's making it clear, this is what's going to happen after I help you identify who has done this. This is what will happen to them. And so Joshua has to carry all of this through. He's the one who actually has to do it. So Joshua arose early in the morning. So he's got his instructions. Nobody's come forward during the night, so early in the morning, he brought Israel near by tribes, and the tribe of Judah was taken. So he brings the 12 tribal leaders in, and Judah is the one that's segregated off. So none of the other 11 tribes had anything to do with this. No one in their tribal group did. So that narrows it down really quick. You've just eliminated 11 out of every 12 people. So you've took a big chunk out. He brought the family of Judah near, and he took the families of the Zerarites, and he brought the family of the Zerarites near man by man. So you even then, much quicker, all the families are brought forward. The patriarchs of the tribe are brought forward, and it's narrowed down to the family of the Zerarites, which would be a man, that he would be the figurehead of that particular tribal portion of Judah. So that narrows it down even more, quite a bit more, in fact. And then all the family heads under him, so basically all of his sons, are brought in, man by man. and a man by the name of Zabdi is taken. So we narrow it down even more. So you see how quickly God begins to narrow down a pool of about 1 to 2 million people into a very, very small group of people who have the potential to be guilty. And then he brought his household near man by man. So again, the way it works is each father would bring his sons, and then they would bring their sons. We're getting down to a smaller and smaller group of people. And as this man named Zabdi brings his sons, Achan and the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah from the tribe of Judah was taken. So it continues to narrow down through Zabdi to Carmi to Achan himself. And God then makes it clear that Achan is the man who has done what has brought this evil upon all the tribe of Israel, all the nation of Israel. So verse 19, then Joshua said to Achan, my son, I implore you, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and give praise to him, and tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me. So Joshua is now pleading with Achan to come clean, to be honest about what he's done. It's really too late. There is no forgiveness at this point. He has to carry out the punishment that God has commanded. But he doesn't want to do it without proof, and rather than having to dig around and try to figure out where Achan has hidden these things, he asked him to at least be honest enough at this point to confess what he's done and to reveal where he has hidden the things that he took that he was not entitled to take. So Achan answered Joshua and said, truly I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel, and this is what I did. And so he does finally come clean and admit that he did do something that God said he shouldn't do, and that he did sin against God himself. And this is what he did. We said, when I saw among the spoil a beautiful mantle from Shinar and 200 shekels of silver and a bar of gold 50 shekels in weight, then I coveted them and took them, and behold, they are concealed in the earth inside my tent with the silver underneath it. So basically, he had hidden all these things in the ground in the middle of his tent. He just dug a hole and dumped them in and hid those things there. Now, we went through this whole story. Let's do a little bit of a recap and let's kind of talk about sin. But before I do, I have a question. And you often hear this said, and you might have said it yourself. I've said it myself a few times, and then I thought more deeply about it through the years. Have you ever heard the saying that everybody has their price? And what is it exactly that we mean by that when we say it, that everybody has their price? What we say that, what we mean by it, is that everybody will steal, basically, or do something dishonest if the price is high enough. So if the reward is high enough for the sin, everybody has a price at which they will lay aside their morals and violate their own inner conscience to do. Now, I agree with that to this point. I think that every lost person truly does have their price. Because I don't think a person who is a sinner by nature and does not have the Holy Spirit in them has the ability to say no to temptation if the temptation level gets high enough. Do you? I think every person, apart from the power of God working in them, will have a limit before they cave into temptation. So I would agree with it to that point. Do I think that every Christian has their price? And the answer to that is no. Because if you're empowered and indwelt by the Holy Spirit, is not the Holy Spirit sufficient to give you victory over the temptations of this world? And the answer is yes, which means Christians then don't have a price. So we can't say that of everyone. I think you can say that of a lost world. Now, Achan's price is actually pretty high. That's a lot. I mean, that's a whole lot. In his day, 50 shekels of gold and 200 shekels of silver is worth, that's life-changing money. That's enough to not have to work again. You could live off of that the rest of your life. So he looks at that and he covets it. He knows exactly what went wrong in his heart. He says, I coveted them. In other words, I know they didn't belong to me. They belonged to God, but I wanted them, and I wanted them enough that I took them. Stealing, and a lot of sin, by the way, comes from coveting. Looking at something that's not yours, that you're not entitled to, that you're not supposed to have, and wanting it so badly that you take it anyway. And that's what he admits. He knew what happened. He started to covet, and then he took what he wanted because it was there and he could take it. And then he hid it, because you can also see the guilt of sin. He knew that what he did was wrong, and that's why he tries to hide it. And that gives way to what I think is one of the biggest false notions that we have about sin. I can hide my sin. Really? Who exactly are you trying to hide your sin from? The question for Achan, I think, is the same question for us, because we all, as sinners, have some common things. We have some things in common with Achan. Let's put it that way. We have some things in common with Achan. Christians in particular don't sin in public. We sin in secret. Well, who exactly are we hiding our sin from? Each other? Yeah, because really, we kind of deep down already know that the only people we can hide sin from are other people. We know deep down inside you can't hide your sin from God, but we live in this functional disconnect where we think we can hide from God, even though we know we can't. So Achan knows he can't hide this from God, but he lives with the delusion that he can. So he believes that by taking it into his tent and burying it in the ground, that not only can he hide his sin from all of Israel, he can also hide his sin from God. Now, this is the same God, by the way, that he just witnessed knocking the walls of Jericho down. So he knows something of the power of God, the ability of God, and yet he still thinks that he can hide his sin. And we often do the same. We often think I can hide my sin. We also think this about sin. If I do it, the reward is greater than the cost. In other words, I will be better off. So as believers in particular, this is a thought process we go through because we're no longer enslaved to sin. I'm not even sure lost people necessarily go through this thought process always. They might at some level, but it's not at the level a Christian will go through it. So a believer filled with the Spirit of God, empowered by that Spirit to have victory over sin, set free from their own sin nature. In other words, you are now free. Your sin nature no longer controls you the way it did before. We go through this. The question is, can I hide it? Well, I think so. Will I be better off? Well, probably. And that, again, is really crazy when you think about it, because we know we can't hide it. And we know that sin comes with a cost that's much higher than the reward. And yet we delude ourselves into thinking we can hide it and that we will be better off if we do it. So again, this is a process. Achan goes through it. You see this in the story. It's amplified over and over again. I can hide my sin. The cost won't be as high as the reward. I will be better off after I engage in that sin. Now, we know the end of the story. I think most of us do, right? What happens to Achan? What happened to Achan? Does anybody remember the rest of the story? What happens to Achan at the end of the story? He's stoned to death. Is he the only one who's stoned to death? No. Who else is stoned to death? His wife and his children. Oh, can you imagine? And then after they're stoned to death, they're all piled up and burned. They're literally erased from existence. Is he better off, do you think? You think there's a lesson here? There's a lesson here for Israel that God is teaching in a very vivid, visual fashion. He's teaching them, number one, you cannot hide your sin. This guy hid it pretty well, but guess what? He didn't hide it from God. Number two, you won't be better off in the end. There might be a little joy and euphoria in the moment, and I'm sure there was a little joy and euphoria in Achan's family when he brought that gold and silver in and they hid it in the ground because they were aware. Everybody says it's not fair that his wife suffered. You don't think his wife didn't know that he dug a hole in the middle of the tent? Really? My wife knows if I sneeze wrong in the bathroom. Right? There ain't anything goes on in the tent of your house that your wife don't know about. She knew exactly what was in that hole, and so did the kids. You think they consecrated themselves the night before? Well, obviously they didn't. Nobody did. So they were complicit. That's the reason they get punished as well. So his sin affected his children and his wife because he drew them into it. And that's the other negative lesson about sin, is that not only do the consequences of your sin carry over on those around you, you also draw people that you love into your sin with you. They either cover for you or they become participators in your sin. And that's not fair. And it's wrong, and it happens a lot. So God is teaching the children of Israel, you can't do this. You cannot do this. You cannot live this way. You're my people. I've called you to be holy. You cannot function like this. If you do, I'm going to teach you something. I'm going to teach you that the cost is greater than the reward. I'm going to teach you that you can't hide your sin. Not only that, but the lessons just keep flowing. I mean, this is a very insightful passage on sin. We see again this idea that Achan has. I see it, I want it, so it is okay for me to have it. No matter what he knows about God, all of that gets shoved off to the side once he sees something that he wants, and he then justifies his right to have it. That's what coveting does. Coveting sees, wants, and then justifies the acquisition of. Even if it's at the cost of someone else. I'm not even sure that really matters once we get past the I want it because I see it and I deserve it stage. Once we justify our right to something, we'll do just about anything to have it. So I can hide my sin. No, you can't. I'll be better off. No, you won't. I see it, I want it, so it's okay. No, it's not. And again, God is angry because not only is Achan thinking this way, but I got a feeling a lot of the children of Israel are thinking this way. And God knows the hearts of men better than men do, and I believe in this moment, God knows without any doubt that if he does not nip this in the bud, the next time they take a place and he tells them to leave the gold and the silver for his treasury, there won't be any gold or silver at all going into his treasury because everybody's going to help themselves. Because if you don't deal with this, sin has a tendency to breed. What was the old phrase? My mom used to use this phrase, nip it in the bud. I'm still not exactly sure what that means, but she used to say that a lot of times when she punished me. She said, I'm going to nip your bad behavior in the bud. So I mean something, and I'm sure it was intended in goodwill, that she was going to try to stop my errant ways, from getting any worse than they were. But that's what God is doing here. He's trying to stop the sin that will spread, because sin will spread. No one will be hurt by this is another thing that you see Achan falling into the trap of. This lie that there won't be any hurt or pain caused by his actions. Well, again, we see just how far the hurt and pain went. It affected an entire nation, cost 36 families a loved one, cost 36 men their lives. Instead of building homes in the promised land, they died in the entryway to the promised land. Achan's whole family gets caught up in his sin, becomes participators in it, or at least cover-uppers, if you will. And they paid a price. They paid the ultimate price with their life as well. So many people were hurt by Achan's action, including Achan himself. Who wants to see his wife and children stoned to death? And then the idea that God really won't care. Boy, that's a big one, isn't it? And you see that a lot even today. Achan really believes that God isn't going to care. If he does know, he's not going to care. And it's not going to be a big deal. You're stealing from God. I guarantee you it's going to be a big deal, and God is going to care. But again, it gets caught up in that whole, I see it, I want it, I deserve it, I have a right to it, and everything else just kind of gets pushed off to the side. So practical questions based on this lesson tonight as we look at the story of Achan and the attempt to cover up sin and the idea that you can justify this level of sin, or any level of sin for that matter. Does God still care about sin today? Yeah, that's not an Old Testament thing, is it? It's unfortunate today that you hear a lot of people who say they're Christians going around and explaining, or trying to explain, that God doesn't care about sin any longer. That because of the cross, sin doesn't matter. But I simply don't see that in Scripture anywhere. Sin still matters. That's the reason for the cross, is because God cares so much about sin. There's no need for the cross unless God hates sin. Yes? Well, that's a debatable question. So is it his sins or their sin in actually helping hide what he did? We don't even know because the Bible doesn't say. Either way, though, consider, I've always thought about that question. Either way, Achan bears the brunt of the responsibility because his children didn't steal that stuff. He did. If he doesn't bring it into his home, they don't get caught up in it at all. So either way, he bears the brunt of the blame, the responsibility for what happens to his children. But if you think about as a parallel, and I took this very seriously as a parent as I learned more and more of the Bible and how God dealt with people, and you can't really understand how God deals with people if you don't study the Old Testament. And it's the tragedy of our day is that the modern American Christian knows very little, if anything, about the Old Testament. Many people follow in certain big-name leaders' footsteps and believe that the Old Testament God is very dissimilar from the New Testament God, almost like there's two different gods for two different eras. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if he dealt that way with Israel, you can be certain he deals that way with us. On top of that, most of the principles that are taught in the Old Testament are about us. And people haven't changed. People are still who they are. The only thing that changes is technology and clothing styles and culture, but the hearts of people are the same. So what I learned from that was the more sin I keep out of my life, the better chance my kids have. The more sin I bring into the home, the more likely they are to join me in it. Just a lesson I took from that personally. So I viewed my life as, if I got faults and I got sin in my life, I need to get it out of my life as quickly as possible so I don't draw my children into it as well. And I think that's a lesson that's a valid lesson from Achan's life. Because either way, he drew his children into it. Whether they were there and they saw, and they probably were in the tent, let's be honest. In the evening, the whole family went into the tent area. He came back from that battle in the evening, went into that tent, and it's almost like 90% certain his entire family was in there. They dug the hole, they put the gold and silver in there, they covered it up, they put all their belongings back on top. That's how extensive the deception was. They basically rebuilt their dwelling place over top of it, so that didn't happen in 5 minutes. And then they just pretended as if it wasn't there. But if he doesn't bring that back, do his children get caught up in that? And the answer is no, they don't. And we don't know the ages either. The Bible doesn't tell us. And I think there's a reason the Bible is vague about certain things like that, like what did the children know, how old were they? Because we can take that general principle and we can apply that to our own lives, regardless of the age of our children. I believe it's important for me as a Christian man, as a father and a husband, to not bring sin into my home. And I believe it was important when my children were 6 months old, and I believe it was important when my children were 16 years old. Do you think that's a valid lesson from this? I do. I think it's a very important lesson. Because I can't hide it. I won't be better off. They won't be better off. If I see it and I want it, they're probably going to see it and want it. I'll be hurt by this. They're going to be hurt by this. God cares if I do it. He's certainly going to care if they do it. All those basic lessons apply not just to the person of Achan, but also to everybody in his family that he affected by what he did. And God is going to be just, and he is going to be harsh, at least to us at times. The follow-up question, does God still care? Absolutely. Does sin in the church affect the church? If God's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and Achan's sin affected Israel to that extent, you can be certain that sin still affects the church today. If sin doesn't affect the church, why do we have the 7 letters to the churches in Revelation? Why is Jesus telling his people, his church, the redeemed, during the age of grace, if you guys don't straighten up, I'm going to whip you? That's what he tells them, isn't it? If you read those 7 letters, if you don't stop doing this, there's a price to pay, because sin affects the church as well, just like it did Israel. Maybe not this extreme in all instances, but as a general rule, it always has an effect. Does God limit the church's power based on sin? I believe so. I think he does. Does my sin affect those around me? I mean, you start processing through all the lessons you can learn from the story of Achan. Does sin affect those around me? Absolutely. Absolutely does. My sin absolutely does affect those around me. And the closer you are to me, the more my sin affects you. It's just inevitable. It's a consequence, part of the cost of sin. And does God really know about everything I do? Yes. He knows everything you do, everything you think, everything you feel. And he knows it before you do it, think it, or feel it. He knew it way back before you even existed, that this would be the course of your life. These are the thoughts you would have. These are the things you would do. So all these lessons Achan learns are applicable to us today. Even the idea of consecrating yourself before morning. Think of the parallel. The Bible in the New Testament teaches something very similar when it says this: today is the day of salvation. Why is today the day of salvation? Why not tomorrow? Because tomorrow may not come, right? The nighttime was the opportunity to consecrate himself. When morning came, guess what? It was too late for consecration. Today's the day of salvation because you might not get tomorrow. You might not be here tomorrow. You might be judged by tomorrow. That's the reason. So it's the same parallel. So you have this lesson about sin that when you're given the opportunity to repent, you should take advantage of it. That's another lesson that we learn from the story of Achan. He was given an opportunity to consecrate himself. He didn't do it, so God consecrated Israel by dealing with Achan in the way in which God dealt with him was to remove him from Israel. Not only him, but also his family, teaching a very powerful object lesson to an entire nation of sinners. And never forget that. Israel was chosen to be the city on the hill, but it was a city on the hill made up of sinners just like you and me. Just like the Philistines, just like the Amorites. Achan is no better or worse than any of us. He's just a man who was fallen and had a sin nature. And he made some bad decisions and did some terrible things, and the price was exceptionally high. And that's the way it often is, unfortunately. So let's learn the lessons. You can't hide your sin. You won't be better off for it. The reward is nowhere near as high as the cost. Just because you see it and want it doesn't mean you should take it, and it certainly doesn't mean it's good for you. No one will be hurt by my sin is a false statement that the devil has perpetuated for thousands of years. Everybody is hurt by sin if it comes in contact with them. And God won't really care is another one of those lies the devil loves to spread. God absolutely does care. He cared when Adam and Eve ate from the tree that they were told not to eat from. He cared when Moses struck the rock because he was angry with God and the people. He cares when we break his commandments. He does care, and that's not going to change. All right, so let's close. You guys going to do prayer requests tonight? All right, let's do prayer requests, and then we'll close.